The air tasted like ash and regret. The champagne flutes lay shattered on the manicured lawn, reflecting the dying light like pools of crimson. He was holding her hand, whispering promises that had once been meant for me. The laughter echoing from the house felt like tiny knives twisting in my gut. They believed they had gotten away with it. They thought they had broken me beyond repair, but they were wrong. If your family is everything to you, subscribe now. My life with Mark had always felt like a fairy tale. We met in college, a whirlwind of late-night study sessions and stolen kisses under the autumn leaves. He was everything I thought I wanted, handsome, intelligent, and deeply devoted. We built a life together, brick by brick, filled with shared dreams and whispered secrets. Our careers blossomed, we bought a charming house in the suburbs, and after years of trying, we were finally expecting our first child. Everything seemed perfect. Then, David entered the picture. Mark's best friend since childhood, David was a constant presence in our lives. He was at every barbecue, every holiday gathering, every milestone celebration. I initially welcomed him, appreciating his loyalty to Mark and the easy camaraderie they shared. David was charming, undeniably, but there was always something about his smile that made my skin crawl. I couldn't quite put my finger on it, a subtle flicker in his eyes that hinted at something darker beneath the surface. I tried to dismiss my unease, attributing it to mere discomfort around someone I didn't know incredibly well. He was Mark's closest friend, practically a brother, and I told myself I was being paranoid. My name is Cora, and I'm not someone who easily trusts my gut instinct. That was my first mistake. I remember the day Mark announced that David would be joining us for Christmas dinner. "He's alone this year, Cora," Mark had said, his voice laced with a strange mix of guilt and anticipation. "It's the least we can do." I forced a smile, pushing down the wave of apprehension that washed over me. "Of course," I replied, my voice betraying none of the turmoil inside. The weeks leading up to Christmas were filled with a growing sense of dread. David seemed to be around more than ever, constantly at our house for impromptu visits, always finding ways to insert himself into our lives. Mark, oblivious to my discomfort, seemed to relish David's company, their laughter echoing through the house like a mocking reminder of my growing isolation. I tried talking to Mark about it, gently expressing my unease, but he dismissed my concerns as pregnancy hormones and jealousy. "You're being ridiculous, Cora," he'd say, his tone laced with irritation. "David's my best friend." I wanted to believe him, I truly did, but the knot in my stomach only tightened with each passing day. Then came Christmas Eve. The house was filled with the aroma of pine needles and cinnamon, the air buzzing with festive cheer. Mark and David were in the living room, laughing and reminiscing about old times, while I busied myself in the kitchen, putting the finishing touches on our Christmas feast. I overheard snippets of their conversation, a careless remark here, a suggestive joke there, and a cold dread washed over me. I tried to shake it off, reminding myself that I was being irrational, that my hormones were playing tricks on me, but the feeling persisted, a gnawing suspicion that something was terribly wrong. The next morning, Christmas Day, the illusion shattered. I woke up early, eager to start the day and bury my anxieties in the joy of the holiday. I found Mark and David in the living room, asleep on the couch, empty bottles of whiskey scattered around them. As I reached for a blanket to cover Mark, I noticed something glinting on the floor. It was Mark's phone. Driven by a force I couldn't explain, I picked it up and scrolled through his messages. My blood ran cold as I read the string of explicit messages between Mark and David, messages filled with promises of a future together, a future that excluded me. The words swam before my eyes, each one a brutal blow to my heart. I stumbled back, gasping for air, the phone slipping from my trembling fingers. The reality of their betrayal crashed down on me, a tidal wave of pain and disbelief. The person I trusted most was one of them. The world tilted on its axis. The festive decorations, the carefully wrapped presents, the joyful carols playing softly in the background, all of it became a grotesque mockery of the life I thought I had. I wanted to scream, to shatter every glass ornament, to unleash the fury that was building inside me. But I couldn't. Not yet. I backed away slowly, careful not to wake them, and retreated to the bathroom. Locking the door behind me, I sank to the floor, the cold tile a stark contrast to the inferno raging within. The tears came then, a torrent of anguish and betrayal that racked my body. How could they do this to me? How could Mark, the man I loved, the father of my child, betray me in such a devastating way? And David, his best friend, the person I had welcomed into my home, how could he stoop so low? The questions swirled in my mind, each one more agonizing than the last. I spent the rest of Christmas Day in a daze, going through the motions of opening presents and smiling for the sake of appearances. Mark and David seemed oblivious to my inner turmoil, basking in their secret world, their eyes meeting in fleeting glances that sent shivers of disgust down my spine. I felt like an actress in a play, forced to perform a role I no longer believed in. Every word, every gesture felt like a lie. That night, sleep eluded me. I lay in bed, staring at the ceiling, the images of Mark and David's betrayal flashing before my eyes. The weight of their deception pressed down on me, suffocating me with its intensity. My baby kicked inside me, a gentle reminder of the life I was carrying, the life I was determined to protect. I couldn't let them break me. I wouldn't give them the satisfaction. I had to find a way to fight back, to reclaim my life from the wreckage they had created. The following weeks were a blur of pain and confusion. I tried confronting Mark, hoping to salvage some shred of our relationship, but he denied everything, gaslighting me with practiced ease. He accused me of being hysterical, of letting my hormones get the better of me. He insisted that I had misinterpreted the messages, that David was just a close friend, that I was imagining things. I knew he was lying, but he was so convincing, so manipulative, that I started to doubt my own sanity. I sought solace in my friends and family, confiding in them about Mark and David's betrayal. They were supportive and sympathetic, offering words of comfort and encouragement, but their words felt hollow, unable to penetrate the wall of pain that surrounded me. I felt isolated, alone in my suffering, as if I were the only person in the world who had ever experienced such profound betrayal. As the days turned into weeks, my mental and physical health deteriorated. The stress and anxiety took a toll on my body, leaving me exhausted and drained. I lost my appetite, and my pregnancy became increasingly difficult. I spent hours crying, unable to cope with the weight of my emotions. I considered leaving Mark, of packing my bags and starting a new life somewhere far away, but I couldn't bring myself to do it. I was trapped, bound to him by our shared history, by our impending child, by the fear of the unknown. Moreover, I knew leaving would be exactly what they wanted. They wanted me gone, out of the picture, so they could live their lives together without me. I refused to give them that satisfaction. I decided to stay, to endure their betrayal, to bide my time until I could find a way to expose them and reclaim my life. The decision was not easy. There were nights when I lay awake, consumed by rage and despair, wondering if I could possibly survive this ordeal. But then I would feel my baby kicking inside me, and I would find the strength to carry on. I had to protect my child, to ensure that he or she would grow up in a safe and loving environment, free from the toxicity of Mark and David's deception. I started documenting everything, every lie, every manipulation, every subtle gesture that betrayed their secret. I kept a detailed journal, recording my observations and thoughts, knowing that one day this information would be my weapon. I knew I had to be careful, to conceal my intentions from Mark and David, to play the role of the dutiful wife until the time was right. It was a dangerous game, but I was willing to play it, even if it meant sacrificing my own happiness in the process. I began to notice that David was getting bolder. He would touch my arm a little too long, make comments about my appearance that were inappropriate, and always seemed to be around when Mark wasn't. It was like he was testing me, seeing how far he could push me. One evening, when Mark was away on a business trip, David came over uninvited. He said he just wanted to check on me, to make sure I was okay. I was immediately on edge, but I tried to remain calm. We sat in the living room making small talk, but I could feel his eyes on me, watching me, assessing me. He started talking about Mark, about how much he loved him, how much they had been through together. His words were laced with a possessiveness that made my skin crawl. Then, he leaned closer, his voice dropping to a whisper. He told me that Mark wasn't happy with me, that he never really loved me, that he was only with me because he felt obligated. He said that Mark was meant to be with him, that they were soulmates, and that I was standing in the way of their happiness. I was shocked, but I refused to let him see my fear. I stood up, my voice trembling slightly, and told him to leave. I said that I didn't want to hear another word, that I knew he was lying, and that I would never let him come between me and my husband. He smirked, his eyes glinting with malice. He said that I was being naive, that I didn't know the truth about Mark, and that one day I would regret my decision. Then he turned and walked out of the house, leaving me shaken and vulnerable. I knew then that I had to act fast. David was becoming a threat, and I couldn't risk him exposing their secret before I was ready. I had to find a way to turn the tables on them, to use their own deception against them. I knew it wouldn't be easy, but I was determined to fight for my life, for my child, and for the justice I deserved. The following weeks became a suffocating nightmare. Mark's denials grew more vehement, his manipulations more insidious. He started isolating me from my friends and family, claiming they were a negative influence on my pregnancy. He controlled our finances, restricting my access to money and making me feel financially dependent on him. He even started monitoring my phone calls and text messages, accusing me of being unfaithful. I was trapped in a gilded cage, surrounded by luxury but stripped of my freedom. One evening, after another fruitless argument, Mark's rage reached a boiling point. He cornered me in the kitchen, his eyes blazing with fury. He began shouting, his words like daggers piercing my heart. He accused me of ruining his life, of being a burden, of standing in the way of his happiness. He said he never wanted me, that he only stayed with me because of the baby. The intensity of his hatred was terrifying. I tried to defend myself, but my voice was drowned out by his tirade. I pleaded with him to stop, to think about the baby, but he was beyond reason. Suddenly, he lunged forward, grabbing my arm with a force that made me cry out in pain. He twisted my arm behind my back, pushing me against the counter. I could feel the sharp edge of the countertop digging into my spine. I was trapped, helpless, at his mercy. He leaned in close, his breath hot on my face, and whispered something that shattered the last remnants of my hope. He told me he wished I would just disappear, that he would be better off without me. He said he was in love with David and that they were planning a future together. He wanted me gone. In that moment, something inside me broke. The pain, the betrayal, the fear, it all coalesced into a single, overwhelming wave of despair. I felt like I was drowning, suffocating in a sea of grief. I closed my eyes, surrendering to the darkness. I was done. I don't know how long I stood there, pinned against the counter, but eventually Mark released me. He stormed out of the kitchen, leaving me trembling and broken. I sank to the floor, sobbing uncontrollably. The pain was unbearable, a physical ache that consumed my entire being. I felt like my life was over, that there was no way out of this hell. I was alone, pregnant, and trapped in a relationship with a man who hated me. I genuinely considered ending it all, of simply giving up and letting the darkness consume me. The thought of not having to feel the pain anymore was tempting, a siren song luring me towards the abyss. I found myself in the bathroom, staring at my reflection in the mirror. My face was pale and gaunt, my eyes bloodshot and swollen. I barely recognized myself. I looked like a ghost, a shadow of the woman I once was. I reached out and touched my stomach, feeling the gentle flutter of my baby's movements. The life inside me, the innocent, helpless being that depended on me for survival, it was the only thing that kept me from completely losing myself. I couldn't do it. I couldn't give up. I had to protect my child, to give him or her a chance at a happy life. I realized then that I had a choice. I could succumb to the darkness, or I could fight back. I could let Mark and David destroy me, or I could reclaim my life and seek the justice I deserved. The decision was clear. I stood up, my legs trembling, and looked myself in the mirror. My eyes were still filled with pain, but there was something else there too, a flicker of determination, a spark of defiance. I would not be a victim. I would not let them break me. I would become a force to be reckoned with. I started planning. I began to meticulously analyze Mark and David's behavior, searching for their weaknesses, their vulnerabilities. I knew that their biggest weakness was their arrogance, their belief that they were untouchable. They thought they were clever, that they could get away with anything. They underestimated me. That was their mistake. I continued to document everything, recording their conversations, their actions, their lies. I gathered evidence piece by piece, knowing that one day it would all come together. I researched my legal options, consulting with a lawyer and learning about my rights. I discovered that Mark's affair with David was not only morally reprehensible, but also potentially grounds for a favorable divorce settlement. The knowledge empowered me, giving me a sense of control over my situation. I also started building a support network, reaching out to my friends and family, and confiding in them about my plans. They were initially hesitant, worried about my safety, but they eventually came around, offering their unwavering support and encouragement. I knew I couldn't do this alone. I needed allies, people I could trust to help me navigate this treacherous path. The transformation was slow, gradual, but with each passing day, I felt myself growing stronger, more resilient. The pain was still there, a constant reminder of Mark and David's betrayal, but it no longer consumed me. I had found a purpose, a reason to fight, a reason to live. I would not let them win. I would expose their lies, reclaim my life, and create a better future for myself and my child. The game had changed. I was no longer a pawn, I was a player, and I was ready to win. I smiled. I played their game, acting the part of the dutiful, pregnant partner, all the while meticulously documenting their every move, every whispered conversation, every furtive glance. I transformed our bedroom into my personal war room, setting up a hidden camera disguised as a teddy bear. A cruel irony, given the circumstances. It streamed directly to a secure encrypted server I'd set up using a VPN and a burner laptop purchased with cash. Every word, every gesture, was now being recorded, cataloged, and analyzed. I even dusted off my old forensics textbook from college, wanting to learn about digital evidence gathering. I knew that any evidence I presented had to be irrefutable, legally sound, and beyond any reasonable doubt. I wasn't just seeking revenge, I was building a case. There were close calls, moments when I thought they suspected something. One evening, Mark was unusually affectionate, running his hands through my hair, his fingers lingering a little too long near the teddy bear. My heart hammered in my chest, but I forced myself to remain calm, meeting his gaze with a practiced smile. "Just tired," I said, feigning exhaustion. He seemed to buy it, thankfully, but the incident left me shaken. I had to be more careful. I started using a voice modulator on my phone whenever I spoke to my lawyer or anyone involved in my plan, masking my voice and making it untraceable. Paranoia became my constant companion, but it also fueled my determination. The anticipation of the strike was almost unbearable. It was like being a coiled spring, wound tighter and tighter, waiting for the precise moment to unleash. I spent hours poring over legal documents, familiarizing myself with the intricacies of family law, custody rights, and the potential implications of Mark's affair on our divorce proceedings. I learned about the concept of alienation of affection in some states and researched whether it applied to our situation. Knowledge was power, and I intended to wield it with precision. I even began tracking their movements, using a GPS tracker I discreetly attached to Mark's car. It gave me insight into their secret rendezvous, their clandestine meetings, their hidden world that I was now determined to expose. The data I collected was damning, painting a clear picture of their deceit and betrayal. I consulted with a private investigator, a woman named Sarah, who specialized in infidelity cases. She was discreet, professional, and incredibly resourceful. I showed her the evidence I had gathered, the recordings, the text messages, the GPS data. She was impressed. "You've done your homework," she said, a hint of admiration in her voice. "Most people come to me with nothing but suspicions." Sarah helped me refine my plan, advising me on the best way to present the evidence in court and maximize my chances of a favorable outcome. She also warned me about the potential risks, the emotional toll, and the possibility of a backlash from Mark and David. But I was undeterred. I was prepared to face whatever came my way. My baby deserved a mother who would fight for her, who would not be intimidated by bullies or silenced by lies. I focused on building my physical strength too. I started taking prenatal yoga classes, not only for the health benefits, but also as a way to clear my mind and center myself amidst the chaos. The classes provided a sense of community, a supportive environment where I could connect with other expectant mothers and share my experiences. It was a welcome respite from the tension and stress of my double life. I knew that the coming confrontation would be emotionally draining, and I needed to be as strong as possible, both mentally and physically. As the weeks passed, my plan began to solidify. I had gathered enough evidence to bury them both, The recordings, the text messages, the GPS data, the financial records, it was all there, meticulously documented and ready to be unleashed. The day was approaching, the day when I would expose their lies and reclaim my life. I could feel it in my bones, a sense of anticipation mixed with trepidation. I knew that the fallout would be explosive, that lives would be shattered, and that the consequences would be far-reaching. But I was ready. I had come too far to turn back now. The time for silent suffering was over. It was time for justice. The breakthrough came unexpectedly, a careless slip in their carefully constructed facade. I was reviewing the financial records Sarah had obtained, tracing the flow of money between Mark's accounts and a shell corporation registered in the Cayman Islands. It was a complex web of transactions designed to hide assets in the event of a divorce. But amidst the intricate details, I found something else. A series of payments to a private clinic in Switzerland, specializing in experimental treatments for a rare genetic disorder. My blood ran cold. David had mentioned early in our relationship that he suffered from a rare condition, a degenerative disease that slowly robbed its victims of their motor skills. He'd always downplayed it, claiming it was under control, but the payments to the Swiss clinic told a different story. He was hiding something big. I dug deeper, using Sarah's resources to access medical records and confidential files. The truth was even more shocking than I could have imagined. David's condition was far more advanced than he had let on. He was terminally ill, with only a few years left to live. And Mark knew. He had been secretly funding David's treatments, using money that should have been going towards our family, our future. The realization hit me like a punch to the gut. Their relationship wasn't just an affair, it was a pact, a desperate attempt to cling to each other in the face of death. They were willing to sacrifice everything, including me and my baby, to preserve their twisted version of happiness. It was a level of depravity that I couldn't comprehend. This was it. This was the leverage I needed, the final piece of the puzzle. It wasn't just about infidelity or financial malfeasance. It was about betrayal, deception, and a callous disregard for human life. I knew exactly what I had to do. I decided to set a trap, a carefully orchestrated confrontation that would expose their lies and shatter their world. I booked a weekend getaway at a remote cabin in the mountains, a place Mark and I had often visited during our happier times. I told him I wanted to reconnect, to try and salvage our relationship for the sake of the baby. He seemed surprised, but also cautiously optimistic. I could see the flicker of hope in his eyes, the desperate desire to believe that things could somehow go back to the way they were. I knew he would bring David. He couldn't resist the opportunity to spend a weekend alone with him, away from the prying eyes of the world. I made sure to accidentally leave my laptop open on the kitchen counter, displaying a draft of a supposed apology letter to Mark, expressing my remorse for my irrational jealousy and my willingness to work on our marriage. It was a carefully crafted performance, designed to lull them into a false sense of security. The cabin was isolated, miles from the nearest town, with limited cell phone service. It was the perfect place to stage my final act. I spent the days leading up to the trip meticulously preparing the cabin, planting hidden cameras and microphones in every room. I wanted to capture everything, every word, every gesture, every incriminating detail. I even rigged the fireplace with a concealed projector, which would display the evidence I had gathered. The text messages, the financial records, the medical reports, onto the wall during the confrontation. It was elaborate, theatrical, but I wanted to leave no room for doubt. I wanted to make sure that they understood the full extent of their crimes. On the day of the trip, I packed my bags, carefully concealing the burner laptop and the encrypted hard drive containing all the evidence. I wore a wire, a small discreet microphone that would record everything I said. As Mark and David arrived, their faces etched with a mixture of apprehension and excitement, I plastered on a fake smile and welcomed them inside. "I'm so glad you both could make it," I said, my voice dripping with false sincerity. Little did they know it would be the worst weekend of their lives. The snow was falling heavily as we settled into the cabin, a thick blanket of white enveloping the surrounding forest. The fire crackled in the fireplace, casting flickering shadows on the walls. The atmosphere was deceptively cozy, a stark contrast to the storm that was about to break. As the evening wore on, I could feel the tension building, the unspoken words hanging heavy in the air. Mark and David exchanged furtive glances, their eyes betraying their guilt and fear. I knew that the moment of truth was fast approaching. After dinner, I suggested we play a game, a seemingly innocent suggestion that would serve as the trigger for my plan. Let's play truth or dare, I said, my voice barely a whisper. Mark and David hesitated, their eyes darting nervously around the room. They knew something was up, but they couldn't quite put their finger on it. Come on, I insisted, my smile widening. Mark finally relented, his voice strained. Okay, he said. I looked at him, my eyes filled with cold determination. The game began, innocent enough at first, with silly questions and harmless dares. But as the night wore on, the questions became more pointed, the dares more revealing. I steered the conversation towards their relationship, subtly probing their vulnerabilities, their secrets, their lies. With each passing moment, I could feel them unraveling, their carefully constructed facade crumbling before my eyes. Finally, I decided it was time to deliver the final blow. I stood up, my voice trembling slightly, and looked at them both, my eyes filled with a mixture of pain and rage. I have a truth for both of you, I said, my voice barely above a whisper. I reached for the remote control, my finger hovering over the button that would unleash the evidence, the button that would destroy their lives. It's time for the world to see the real you, I said, my voice filled with venom. And then, just as I was about to press the button, the power went out. The cabin was plunged into darkness, the only light coming from the flickering flames in the fireplace. A scream escaped my lips, a primal cry of frustration and fear. Mark and David stared at me, their faces unreadable in the dim light. Had they anticipated this? Had they somehow found a way to sabotage my plan? Or was it just a cruel twist of fate? As my eyes adjusted to the darkness, I saw Mark reach into his pocket. He pulled out a small object, something metallic and glinting in the firelight. It was a gun. The world seemed to tilt on its axis as the cabin was consumed by darkness, the fire casting menacing shadows that danced like mocking spirits. Mark's eyes gleamed with a chilling resolve as he leveled the weapon. It didn't have to be this way, he hissed, his voice a venomous whisper. My mind raced, adrenaline coursing through my veins. This wasn't just about betrayal anymore. It was about survival. But then, David grabbed Mark's arm. He wheezed, his face contorted in pain and desperation. Mark shoved him aside, his face a mask of fury. There is no other way, and that was the distraction I needed. In that split second of chaos, I lunged, knocking over a nearby table, sending dishes crashing to the floor. The sound reverberated through the cabin, momentarily disorienting Mark. I scrambled to my feet, diving behind the overturned sofa for cover. The weapon discharged, the deafening blast tearing through the silence. Splinters of wood exploded around me as the projectile slammed into the sofa. I squeezed my eyes shut, bracing for the impact, but it never came. When I dared to peek, I saw David crumpled on the floor, a crimson stain blooming on his chest. Mark stood frozen, the weapon still clutched in his trembling hand, his face a portrait of horror and disbelief. He hadn't meant to. He looked at me, was all he got out. In that instant, I saw my chance. I grabbed the fire poker leaning against the hearth. With a surge of adrenaline-fueled strength, I charged at Mark, swinging the poker with all my might. It connected with his hand, shattering bone and sending the weapon clattering to the floor. He screamed, clutching his mangled hand, his eyes wide with terror. I didn't stop. I couldn't stop. Years of pain, betrayal, and rage poured out of me in that moment. I swung the poker again and again, each strike fueled by the injustice I had endured. I didn't stop until he was a broken heap on the floor. Not ended, just broken. A life sentence in a prison he created. The silence that followed was deafening, broken only by my ragged breathing and the crackling of the fire. I stood there, panting, my body trembling, the fire poker still clutched in my hand. I looked down at Mark and David, their bodies lying motionless on the floor, their twisted game finally over. The weight of what I had done crashed down on me, threatening to suffocate me. But amidst the fear and the horror, I felt a sense of liberation, a sense of finally reclaiming my life. I had survived. I made my way to the burner laptop I'd stashed in my bag. My hands shook as I typed in the password, the screen flickering to life. With trembling fingers, I uploaded the evidence to a secure server, sending copies to my lawyer, my family, and several media outlets. The truth would be told. The police arrived within hours, alerted by the emergency beacon I had activated. The scene they encountered was one of utter devastation. The cabin was a wreck, the air thick with the scent of smoke and crimson. Mark was taken into custody, charged with a long list of crimes. The evidence I had provided was irrefutable, damning him beyond any reasonable doubt. His carefully constructed world crumbled around him, his reputation in tatters, his freedom gone. The trial was a media circus, the details of Mark and David's affair splashed across every newspaper and television screen. The public was outraged by their betrayal, their deceit, and their callous disregard for human life. Mark tried to deny everything, to paint himself as a victim of my obsessive jealousy, but the evidence spoke for itself. He was convicted on all charges and sentenced to life in prison. As he was led away, his eyes met mine for a brief, fleeting moment. I saw the hatred, the anger, the resentment. But I also saw something else, a flicker of fear. He knew he had lost. He knew that his actions had consequences. As for me, I walked away from the courthouse a free woman. The ordeal had taken its toll, leaving me emotionally scarred and physically exhausted. But I was alive, and I was determined to rebuild my life, to create a better future for myself and my child. I sold the house, the one filled with so many false memories, and moved to a new city, far away from the shadows of my past. I focused on my baby, showering her with love and affection, determined to give her the life she deserved. I started a new career, pursuing my passion for writing, and found solace in telling my story, in sharing my experiences with others. The money Mark had tried to hide was recovered, providing me with the financial security I needed to raise my daughter. He thought he could control me with money, but he failed. They lost everything. I just smiled. Revenge isn't sweet. It's necessary. Would you have done the same? Let me know in the comments. Subscribe for more justice.